Jamar Chase reportedly going to come in here and say, hey, I'll take 40 million a year. 40 million. I'll take 40 million a year, please. Kind of a lot. You look back and say, man, I remember back in my day. 40 million now. The question for the Bengals moving forward is, I don't think it's if the Bengals sign Jamar Chase. I think it's a matter of when and how much and for how long. Because you're not going to break up the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase tandem here. I think that's the thing. The beauty of, if you went into the league a year after Joe Burrow comes in, the beauty of taking a guy like Penei Sewell, minus the fact that the run game would be a lot better, Joe Burrow wouldn't get hurt as much, and he'd probably still be nearly just as good. Arguable debates here. I mean, nearly, I said, you can't replace Jamar, but I mean, you give him time in the pocket. Think about how good he'd be. Might have a Super Bowl right now. Might not, though, because, hey, you didn't have Jamar Chase going for 250 against the Chiefs, and so we can go all day. But the beauty of taking a guy like Penei Sewell is he didn't have Joe Burrow sleeping in the same room with him. He didn't have Joe Burrow playing on a football team with all that team chemistry, the relationship, the friendship. You didn't have that. So when the contract came up, you didn't say, hey Joe, we're not gonna keep this guy. And then Joe's kind of like, we're not really attached. But no, Joe and Jamar Chase have a whole different relationship, a whole different connection. They have that prior chemistry. They have that close relationship. And you have to do what you have to do to keep Joe Burrow happy, which means you're not letting Jamar Chase go. I would imagine there's about a 0% chance Jamar Chase isn't a Bengal 3 years from now. Could be. That'd be pretty wild, but I think it's going to happen. Which, there's nothing wrong with that. No, don't get me wrong. Again, we just seen what Jamar Chase did for this football team this season. We've seen, again, like I said, even with no protection, even without Sewell, when you go back to that draft, if you didn't have Jamar Chase gashing teams one-on-one, forcing them to respect, his abilities, especially in those big games, the Bengals might not have ever gotten where they was anyway. So you have to really appreciate and respect what Jamar Chase has done. He opens things up for T. He opens things up for the rest of this offense. He creates mismatches, helps Joe Burrow in that regard. There's a lot of reasons to like Jamar Chase, and for certain, you want to keep this man on your football team. But let's talk about this $40 million a year. Again, I thought, hey, when you watched him play this season, I was already said he's going to get 40. Just watching him play, coming in that contract year, you waited too long. He was going to play his best ball. He was going to get 40. After last year's 35, 40 just seemed like the number. Seemed kind of like a stretch at the time, but not really anymore. And here's a big part of it. The NFL's really evolved at the wide receiver position in the last 10 years. What's crazy is it doesn't feel like it's evolved. Jamar Chase still hasn't touched anything Antonio Brown did. If we're being completely honest. Talk about unguardable. Talk about playing everywhere on the field. But, Julio Jones, Tyreek Hill, OBJ, all these guys had their peaks. And we bring them up because at the time when Antonio Brown signed his contract extension, when Tyreek Hill, or we should say when Julio Jones, when OBJ, when these three signed their contract extensions, the inaugural year, where the salary cap was the inaugural of their contract extension based on an average annual value of those contracts, the percentage of the cap they took up sat right around 10%. 9.9, a little over 10, a little under 9. All three of them right around that range. Now we fast forward where really you can probably look back and say, could be wrong. I'm thinking Tyreek Hill is really the wide receiver that reset everything because he went to free agency and a team was willing to pay him top dollar to scoop him up, and that kind of reset everything at the wide receiver market. And Tyreek Hill comes in, gets $30 million a year, goes to the Dolphins, and he comes in at 13.7% of the salary cap. Justin Jefferson ups his contract last season, highest paid wide receiver, deservedly so, in the NFL. Comes in at 14.4% of the 2024 salary cap based on his AAV. Big numbers. That being said, you look at the $40 million, you look at the salary cap projected to be about $279.5 million this year. That's the median. They said 277.5 to 281.5 was the reports. Smack down in the middle, 279.5. That would come in at 14.3% of the salary cap if Jamar Chase signed for $40 million on a dot, which means, hey, he's right in line. He's right in line with fellow wide receiver, former teammate Justin Jefferson. He's just a little bit higher than Tyreek Hill. And it is very possible. It is crazy, though, because we brought up the history. It's like, hey, if things were like they were just 10 years ago, Jamar's coming in about $27 million. And he's coming in about the highest paid wide receiver in the league. So it's kind of interesting, the dynamic to see the way the wide receiver market's really kind of taken off and become more important to an offense. Or has it? Or has it? Now, this is, again, where things get a little interesting. Now, of course, A.J. Brown just won a Super Bowl, so it's going to put a twist into this. They got so many of these young guys. I mean, the Eagles had to be perfect. They had to be perfect in the draft to do what they did, and that's what they were. To be completely clear, right? We have to keep that in mind with this Eagles football team. You know, a lot of people say, well, they got Devontae, they got A.J. Brown. They had to be perfect in the draft. They have so many guys on rookie contracts that are studs. They had to be. And that's hard to do. That is very, very hard to do. So for most teams in the league, that doesn't work out. But mind you, we bring this up because here's an interesting thing. Seen somebody kind of bring it up. Of all those contracts we mentioned, how many of them had a quarterback at the caliber of Joe Burrow? I mean, don't get me wrong, Big Ben knew how to sling it. I mean, that's what complimented him well. That's why Mike Wallace was so great, Antonio Brown. Big Ben loved to just sling the rock, and they gave him time to throw the football, gave time for his receivers to get open. So A.J. Brown or Antonio Brown really complimented Big Ben. But, I mean, could you really say he was on Joe Burrow's level? I mean, for the most part, most of Big Ben's career, he struggled on the road. He turned the football over a lot. You know, in those regards, he was definitely a durable quarterback, no mistake about it, right? I mean, he was taking a shot, sitting there, taking a shot at the shot, playing through the pain, did what he had to do to win football games. And he won some big ones. But for the most part, I don't think the Steelers ever said, hey, this is a top 5 quarterback. Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, got to keep Justin Jefferson to keep this offense ticking. Do they think, hey, top 5 quarterback? Probably not. Eli Manning, Odell Beckham going to the Browns. You know, did these teams look at this man and say, wow, I got to keep him because my quarterback's the top 5 quarterback and he has to have it? No. Julio Jones, Matt Wright? No. The list goes on. The list goes on. Devontae Adams? No, let's tag him a couple times and let him out the door. We ain't paying him that much to play with a quarterback at Aaron Rodgers level. We think he's a top 5 elite quarterback. No. It doesn't happen a lot where they take up that much of the cap and they keep them. If the quarterback is elite, Tyreek Hill, prime example of the guys we listed. And to be clear, we wasn't trying to nitpick a stat here. Those the first 5 guys that came to mind. I was thinking, elite receivers back in the day. Let's look it up. First 5 that kind of came to mind. AJ Green came to mind, but I just instantly thought, well, the Bengals probably never paid him that kind of money. That was just, I know my team. I know my team. Anyway, you look at that and say, hey, the only one that played with an elite quarterback, they let him go. And that was Tyreek Hill. They said, hey, our quarterback's top 5. Our quarterback's top 3. We'll be all right without him. And that is a whole nother twist to this dynamic. It's not if Jamar Chase is going to get $40 million. It's not is he worth $40 million. It's is it the smart thing to do? Do you want to pay a guy that kind of money when you believe in your quarterback that much? Typically, no. Bengals, as we know, we were just talking about the Eagles had to be perfect in the draft. The Bengals had to be perfect in the draft too if they want to fix this team. You can't. There's just not enough people in free agency to fix this team right now and plug all these holes. There's just not. There's not enough top tier offensive linemen. There's not enough top tier defensive linemen. They're past third year, risking a chance of injury, risking a chance of decline. The odds of it could happen. Remember the 1 year? Was it the 1 year Tobin came in your free agency? The Trey Hendrickson year? Somehow they hit that one out of the park, but that's tough to do. Just because, well, father of time. Free agency does that. We've seen it this year. Sheldon Rankins. La'el Collins. Remember when the Bengals tried to bring him in? I can't even remember the other guy. The other guy was supposed to play. Was that this year supposed to play right tackle? Can't even remember his name anymore. Ahead of Marius Mims. They tried this a few times now. It's tough. It's very difficult in free agency because teams don't like to let top tier guys go, especially younger guys. So you get the older guys that are a little bit more overpaid, slowly declining. It's difficult. I mean, the Bengals are going to have to hit it out of the park in the draft. And right now, the Bengals don't have any guys you look at. They have to pay a lot of money. And because they have to hit it out of the park in the draft, you can definitely say it's worth keeping Jamar for $40 million. Even though that's a ridiculously high number. But you do feel like in this situation, if you had younger talent around Joe Burrow, if you had some up-and-coming guys, if your offensive line is up-and-coming, if you had a lot of this young up-and-coming team that needed paid, then you say, hey, oh yeah, we believe in Joe Burrow as being elite. We can let him go. And you definitely don't feel like the Bengals need, I don't at least. I don't feel like the Bengals need Jamar. Joe Burrow does not need Jamar Chase in his prime for 10 years to be great. Joe Burrow can win an MVP without Jamar Chase, no question about it. Especially Joe Burrow would have done one an MVP, maybe two, if he had the Chiefs, Ravens, or Bills offensive lines the last 4 years. No question about it. If you took out one of them quarterbacks to Joe Burrow, and I think he wins an MVP easily, probably a Super Bowl. And that's the dynamic, though, right? You got to play with what you have, though. Bengals don't have that stuff. You have Jamar Chase right now. If they did have those, then you say, okay, we can move on from him and believe in Joe. But you take away one of the best in the league and then say, hey, Joe, by the way, the offensive line's still kind of sketchy. The run game's still not figured out. Chase Brown looking solid. Defensive line still not figured out. We're gonna take away one of the best in the game. And I guess we're going to trust one of these other positions that haven't been going well. So you're definitely going to pay this man. It is interesting, though, to see 40 million checks out. And it's interesting to see how much more they've been paying wide receivers of late. How much the value of them have went up. Nonetheless, that's going to wrap things up for this video. Love the y'all's thoughts. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.